Hey everyone, if Bitcoin is just going to keep going up, as I believe it will, obviously ups and downs along the way, but overall keeps going up, then why would you ever spend it on anything ever? A couple thoughts there. Well, one, as you know, I use the Coinbase debit card for anything in my life that costs less than $2,500. It has a $2,500 limit. So obviously I can't spend it on anything that's more than $2,500 in a day. But for everything that's less than $2,500, I buy Bitcoin. I use Bitcoin to buy whatever it is. So if Bitcoin's just going to keep going up forever, with the ups and downs along the way, but in the big picture going up, why would you ever spend Bitcoin on anything ever? Well, the first reason is because I have almost 100% of my net worth in Bitcoin. The only thing I don't have in Bitcoin is pretty low balances in my bank accounts, just so if I write a check to a babysitter, it doesn't bounce. So I have very low bank account balances. And then obviously, the vast majority of my Bitcoin is locked up in extremely secure, multi-signature cold storage that's super hard to get to and, has a massive sort of security profile around it. But why would I spend any Bitcoin at all? The answer is because I care about living my life and I care about my family. And you could say, so I don't have US dollar cash to spend on stuff. So the alternative to not spending Bitcoin on stuff would be to not buy anything at all. Well, I've got to eat and my family needs, clothing and shelter and transportation and all that. So I've got to spend something. And if you keep all of your net worth in Bitcoin, then the only something you have to spend is Bitcoin because there's not any US dollars otherwise to spend. So I don't keep US dollars around to spend on food and, transportation, housing, clothing, all that sort of stuff, which means if I was not using Bitcoin to buy stuff, then we would not have clothes or food or shelter or transportation. And obviously those are the four things you got to have to live. Okay, so you got to buy those things somehow, and I don't have US dollars to buy those things because I already converted the US dollars that would have been used to buy those things into Bitcoin. So I've got to use Bitcoin. And I like that I have to use Bitcoin because in general, over time, I am, paying less and less and less for the things I buy than I would be if I were using US dollars. Okay, now the quandary about spending Bitcoin on stuff applies no matter how you have your money invested. So even though inflation eats up 4% to 9% of your money every year if you're in US dollars, you can put money in the stock market. And then you have the exact same quandary I have, which is let's assume the stock market outperforms inflation by 2 or 3% per year. Maybe it's probably in the ballpark. I don't know. It's ever so slightly higher than inflation, whatever that is. So I could ask the same question of you, which is, why do you spend any money on anything instead of just invested in the stock market and your purchasing power will go up 2 or 3% per year and that exact same money can buy you 2% or 3% more stuff next year by keeping in the stock market next year? And the answer is because by that logic, you'd never buy any stuff. You would not buy any clothing, transportation, housing, or food. And you need those things. And also, life is short. You want to buy other things. There's other things you value that you want to buy, and you don't want to wait. You don't want to go live your best life when you're 80 years old and live a meager existence until then, because God made the world and the world is awesome and it's fun having certain things that make life richer and more interesting while you're young and while you're still here, and you're not 80 or 90 or 95 years old. So which means if you have, your wealth in the stock market or in Bitcoin, you're going to have to liquidate some of that to buy whatever it is you need. Now, sometimes there's exceptions. Like a couple months ago when I bought my Tesla, my 2026 Tesla Model Y Launch Series Edition, which is what I drive now. Or I should say what I drive when I'm not traveling. When I'm in the US, that is what I am driving. So I could have liquidated Bitcoin. The price of Bitcoin at the time of the purchase was $85,000. But thankfully, the fiat financial system, which means the old school government-run money system, was willing to lend me money at 6% interest. And so I went to Trustmark, one of the local banks here in Mississippi. I went to Trustmark. They gave me a 5-year loan, 60 months at 6% interest. And I used that money to buy my Tesla. And what happens every month is I liquidate just enough Bitcoin to pay the car payment on that Tesla. So right now, as this car payment comes due, Bitcoin's at $104,000. So a car payment that, had I liquidated the Bitcoin at $85,000, obviously it would have cost me a lot more Bitcoin to make that car payment than if I borrow US dollars using the car as collateral, because the car is collateral. I mean, if I don't make the payments, they will repossess the car. That's how that works, which of course is not going to happen because I could pay for the whole car, right now with cash. It's not cash, but I could liquidate enough Bitcoin to pay for the entire car with US dollars, like right now, easily. So, anyway, that doesn't mean I wouldn't have to jump through a bunch of, hoops and, go tap my cold storage ultra secure Bitcoin. But over the course of a week or two, I could jump through the hoops and, get access to enough Bitcoin to pay off that car completely. But I don't want to do that because the world is willing to lend to me US dollars at 6% interest, and I believe Bitcoin will go up infinitely more than that. And so I will just borrow the money to buy the Tesla from Trustmark, and I will pay them back with 6% interest, and that's ridiculously cheap by comparison as opposed to using Bitcoin. And I'm already getting to make car payments with Bitcoin at $104,000 instead of $85,000. Now there's tougher decisions. The two easy places where the world will loan you money is cars and houses. Now, I'm not saying you should go into, more debt than absolutely necessary on either front. I'm just saying for somebody like me who could pay off a car, I own all my other cars. All the other cars I own for my wife and 2 kids were all paid for with cash. Like I literally showed up with a check in my hand. And so I've never had a car payment in my life until this Tesla. And the only reason I'm willing to have a car payment for this Tesla is because I could easily afford it regardless. And I just want to game the fiat financial system of government money. And so I'll just borrow the infinite money, which is the US dollar that they print more out of thin air. And that will let me preserve the Bitcoin money, which will preserve its value much longer. And hopefully over the course of 5 years, these car payments will basically they'll start feeling like they're practically free, because the Bitcoin I'm using to pay for them is up 500% from the price I paid for the car. So it'll be the equivalent of buying a brand new Tesla for $10,000, which is pretty great. So cars and houses, they will let you borrow relatively cheap capital for, but other things they will not. So I actually have a quandary right now, because when I am in the US, I am usually in Mississippi. And for whatever reason, the places I stay in Mississippi tend to have poor power, meaning the power goes out a lot, especially with the massive, dying off of a gazillion pine trees that happened throughout the Southeast. It seems like pine tree limbs and pine trees themselves are constantly falling on power lines in Mississippi because a bunch of them died all at one time with the big drought a couple years ago, 2 years ago, 2 summers ago. So as a result of that, the power seems to go out a lot. And so obviously it's convenient if the power didn't go out. One solution is to get a generator. Now, a generator, not like a little dinky one, but like a real generator that can power my entire house and everything in it, security systems, the security systems have their own battery backup, so they don't really matter, I suppose. But the other stuff, the oven, the air conditioners, the hot water heater, all that sort of stuff, all the regular comforts of life, a generator that can power all of that stuff easily without having to be super selective on what you turn on and what you turn off, and can power that from the natural gas supply, costs about $20,000, $20,000, which is a lot. So right now that is 1/5 of 1 Bitcoin. So I look at that and I'm like, are the conveniences of having power worth 1/5 of 1 Bitcoin? Now, right now they're not. It's not worth 1/5 of 1 Bitcoin to me to have the conveniences of power for non-essential functions. Again, essential functions, security systems, all that sort of stuff, that's on, its own backup power anyway, so it doesn't matter. But for the conveniences of life of not laying in bed hot because the air conditioner won't work because the power's out, is not worth 1/5 of 1 Bitcoin. But let's assume Bitcoin goes up to $200,000, and now backup power generation costs 1/10 of 1 Bitcoin instead of 1/5 of 1 Bitcoin. So it goes from 0.2 Bitcoin down to just 0.1 Bitcoin, with Bitcoin at 200,000. Well, at that point, you could make the argument that maybe it switches. Maybe it's worth it to me to live a life where the power never goes out. Maybe it's worth 1/10 of 1 Bitcoin. Now, you could argue, but wait, if you buy this generator for 1/10 of 1 Bitcoin for $200,000, and one day Bitcoin is worth $2 million, like a decade or two after that, doesn't that mean you practically paid, instead of $20,000, you paid like $200,000 for this generator? And the answer is yes, but what's the alternative? The alternative is to never live your life and never buy anything. And at some point, life is short, and it's worth, at some point, having things that make your life better. For example, travel is the same way. You can't finance travel. So my family has done a relatively large amount of international travel. We've been all over the place, from Ireland to Thailand to, Honduras. We've just gone a bunch of places. Anyway, all of that is expensive, and none of that is financeable, meaning nobody's going to loan my family money to go to Thailand or to go to Ireland or to go to Honduras or to go to, any of the other places we have been, which means we're funding those trips with Bitcoin at the times we take them. And that is Bitcoin that will appreciate in value, which means over time, those trips will get more and more and more expensive. But what's the alternative? The alternative is to not take the trips at all. And at some point, when you have enough Bitcoin that you feel good about living your life a bit, then it makes sense to do things that involve that. Now, maybe you only have $1,000 of Bitcoin or $10,000 of Bitcoin. But when that Bitcoin, when you bought it at, $500 and it's worth $1,000, maybe it's worth buying something nice for $100. If you buy $10,000 of Bitcoin and it goes up to $50,000, there's nothing wrong with taking a nice trip. It's the exact same thing I'm talking about. It's just a question of scale, of sort of when does it make sense to justify something. So in my case, I've held Bitcoin since 2017. That's been 8 years. The original Bitcoin I bought is up more than 10x. So most of that early Bitcoin, 2017, 2018, my average price was probably just under $10,000, maybe $9,000, something like that. The cheapest Bitcoin I ever bought was $6,400. But most of that early Bitcoin was above or below 10,000, so it averages to probably 9,000, something like that. Well, I'm okay with Bitcoin I bought at 9,000, being at 100,000 and peeling a little bit of money off to go take an international trip with my family to create memories and experiences that my family would otherwise never have. Like, I'm okay doing that. But again, there's two ways to look at that. One is that, but wait a second, let's say an expensive, international trip costs with flights and everything. I mean, flights are insanely expensive if you haven't checked them recently, especially flights to Asia. So you could easily run, $10, $20, $30,000 for a trip. Again, depending on where you're going and how long you're staying, but even let's use a round number. Let's say you go on a trip that costs you $10,000, which I can tell you if you're going to Asia for a couple weeks, it's going to be more than that. But let's say it costs 10 grand. Okay, so 10 grand. One way to look at that is to say, wait, but I spent $10,000 on a trip, and when Bitcoin at 10x's, I'll have spent $100,000 on that trip. That's crazy. Yeah, but another way to look at that is to say, I bought that Bitcoin that I spent for $10,000 for $1,000. So are you going on a $100,000 trip or are you going on a $1,000 trip? And the answer is, once you hold Bitcoin long enough, I look at it the second way, which is, look, I'm not looking at, or I guess the first way, depending on how you order them, I'm looking at it through the lens of saying, how much did I pay for this Bitcoin? Because however much I paid for this Bitcoin, that's what I'm really paying for this trip. The opportunity cost in the future, that's a future version of me. Like, I'm not going to save all of my money until the day I die. Like, I'm going to live a little bit, and then I'm going to spend most of all the money I make in my entire life finding ways to make the world a better place. And the vast majority of wealth I've ever generated has been spent on other people. It's been spent on political campaigns, public policy initiatives, donations to nonprofits. I mean, my wife and I have given away, vast amounts of money far, 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 far more money than we've spent actually just living our lives. But again, that doesn't mean we don't live our lives, and we view the same with charitable giving. Like, if I give a charitable organization money right now, if I give an organization $10,000, and I know that they're going to spend it, of course, what I usually do is I give it in the form of Bitcoin, and I tell them they have to wait at least a year before they spend it, and ideally longer. And my hope is to encourage them to create a strategic Bitcoin reserve for whatever the organization is. But if I give the organization $10,000 with an expectation that they're going to end up spending it in the near term, one way to look at that is to say, yeah, but if I had held on to that money and it doubles, then I could give them $20,000. Yeah, but the other way to look at it is, yeah, but what about all the people that would have benefited from that donation that are not going to benefit from that donation because I'm just sitting on it waiting for the future? And the way I view public policy and political campaigns and things like that is the earlier in human history that you can effectuate a change, the more people benefit. So there are major changes I made it to the legal system and the laws, rules, regulations, etc. of Mississippi. There are major changes I made in 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2020, 2021, 2022. I could have just bought Bitcoin with all the money that it took to make those changes and then tried to make those changes now. But the answer is, but I guess the problem is, okay, but even if I had quadruple or even 10x the amount of money to spend right now, what about all the people that did not benefit between 2017 and now? Am I just going to leave all of the injustices in the world in place with the hope that in the future I can fix those injustices with more money because Bitcoin went up? And, at some level, it's worth doing that to some degree. I'm certainly not going to spend down all of the capital I have for those purposes, but I'm also not going to sit on it all either because people have real needs right now. Laws need to change. Things need to improve. People can benefit right now for things I donate Bitcoin to. And if I just wait, yeah, the Bitcoin goes up in value, but what about all the people who will miss out on that benefit between when I could have made the donation and now? So it's obviously a balance because I'm not giving away all the Bitcoin that I've set aside for charitable giving. I'm certainly not giving away all of that now, but I'm certainly not sitting on all of it indefinitely either. It's a balancing act to make the highest change I can today in the world, but still having enough Bitcoin left over to make the change I anticipate I will want to make in the future. And while the majority of the balance continues to increase in value, I am certainly peeling off Bitcoin and giving it to various causes I care about in the meantime. So anyway, I would encourage you as you think about it, buy as much Bitcoin as you can, hold it as long as conceivably possible. And the better way to think about it when you do spend Bitcoin is, what did I pay for the Bitcoin I'm spending now? Because yeah, in the future, it's going to be worth a lot more. But also in the future, so will your stock portfolio or your bonds or your commodities or whatever. If you sit on them long enough, some of that will also be worth more. But that doesn't mean you don't spend anything. It just means you're smart about it. And that's what I do. And so in the case of my Tesla, I financed it. In the case of a generator, I have decided for the time being not to buy it. But when Bitcoin gets high enough that maybe it costs 1/10 of a Bitcoin to get full power generation, it might be worth 1/10 of a Bitcoin, even if it's not worth 1/5 of a Bitcoin, to get power generation for, the places I usually am when I'm in the United States. So anyway, there's all sorts of those choices. Now, one thing I was on the fence about, and I did a whole video about this, is my daughter's 2023 Toyota Corolla, which I bought back in 2023, so she could have a reliable car to drive. It was basically the number one recommended car for, teens or whatever on Consumer Reports. And it was a hybrid, so she would, pay low gas prices for the lifetime of it and all that. When I bought that car, it cost me 1.1 Bitcoin. And I did liquidate 1.1 Bitcoin to buy that car. Now, I've subsequently bought a lot more Bitcoin. So I guess in some ways you could say, yeah, I didn't really liquidate a Bitcoin because I liquidated a Bitcoin, but within a couple months, I had bought a lot more than that back based on my increased, continually increasing conviction in Bitcoin. So I did end up with more Bitcoin. It's not like that. It's not like I raided my one and only stash to buy that car, but I did buy it with 1.1 Bitcoin at the time of the purchase before I ended up later on buying more than that back. And I could have financed that car. And in retrospect, you could make an argument that I should have financed that car. Now, why did I not finance that car? Well, first of all, it was not my car. I'm okay financing my car because I'm responsible for it and I'm responsible for the payments. And the only person who has a negative consequence if I screw something up is me. But this was not going to be my car. This was going to be my daughter's car. And it was important to me that, I not play the same, I don't short the fiat financial system with my daughter's car the same way I'm willing to do with my Tesla. With my Tesla, it's mine. It's my payments. I feel good about it. I'm good with it. But again, it's not like anyone else is dependent on that car. And if I have to, our family could make it work with one fewer car. It'd just require a massive amount of coordination about how to get 4 drivers, with 3 cars. But it's not impossible. But anyway, but I didn't want to do that. And I wanted my daughter to have a car that was paid for, that she did not have to worry about it, and, it was reliable and all that. And we looked at a bunch of used cars, and they were all like 160,000 miles. And, at the time, used car prices were insanely high due to, government shutdowns with COVID and all that sort of stuff. So anyway, that car cost 1.1 Bitcoin, which at the time I recorded the video was $108,000. I think right now it'd be a little more than that. Cause it'd be 104,000 plus another 10%. So yeah, it'd be like 114,000 or something like that. So yeah, that's an expensive Toyota Corolla. And if it had been for me to drive, I would have financed it, and kept the Bitcoin. And then I would have just had, most of a Bitcoin more in my total Bitcoin stash, because I would be slowly paying off that car over 5 years. But because it was my daughter's car, I didn't want to do that. So I just bought it outright with Bitcoin that I liquidated for that purpose. But again, I subsequently bought back more Bitcoin. So in some ways you could say, I ended up with more Bitcoin, but, had I financed that car, I would own, let's call it, 0.75 more Bitcoin right now or something like that, because I would be paying off that car, which was bought when Bitcoin was, 28,000 a coin, something like that. Obviously the payments would be cheap right now if I had financed that car, but it wasn't my car to finance. It was my daughter's car. So I just did it. But anyway, so hopefully my thought process around all of this is helpful. There's things I am buying, like my daughter's car, straight up. There's things I'm not buying, such as this generator, because I don't want to buy it straight up with Bitcoin. And there's other things like my Tesla that I'm financing. But all of it is an effort to be prudent and responsible with the resources that God has given me, and to be wise and preserve as much Bitcoin as I possibly can, while at the same time not ending up, head over heels in debt or leverage to the hilt where change in the price of Bitcoin puts me upside down or something like that. So hopefully all that makes sense. I am here for anything everyone needs. Have a great day, everyone. Appreciate it.